Good afternoon and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland and this week's Full Scottish. My name is Nadia. On the program this week, we are delighted to be joined by Maureen Watt. Good afternoon, Maureen, and welcome to the program.
Good afternoon, Nadia.
Thank you. And we are also delighted to welcome William Duguid. Good afternoon, William, and welcome to the program.
Hello, hope everybody's well. Looking forward to it.
Let's start with the Ukraine update. Recovery efforts continued in Kiev after a Russian missile and drone barrage killed at least 9 people and wounded 33 civilians over Friday night and into Saturday. A 5-story residential building in the city's Solomiansky district was damaged and a fire broke out. Rescue workers evacuated 35 people from the upper floors of the building and 2 people died, with 8 reported injured, including 2 children, according to Ukraine's state emergency service. In the Darensky district of Kiev, 7 people were killed and another 14 injured after the attack caused fires and damage to houses, vehicles, and administrative and non-residential building, the emergency services said. On Saturday, President Zelensky announced that Ukrainian drones had struck 3 oil refineries in Russian Republic of Bashkortostan. The refineries process millions of tons of oil each year and are located nearly 1,600 kilometers from Ukraine, Zelensky said. Zelensky also said that a sanctioned Russian container ship, the Yanina, sank in the Black Sea after being hit by Ukrainian drones. The ship was listed as part of the facilities that sustained the war effort. The International Atomic Energy Agency said on Saturday that Ukraine's Srebrenica nuclear power plant lost off-site power for nearly 2 hours, the 23rd time it has happened since the full-scale Russian invasion. The plant is illegally occupied by Russia and not operating, but needs power supplied from outside to power cooling systems that maintain the safety of its nuclear materials. Ukraine's campaign to cut off illegally occupied Crimea from Russia has led to the people having to queue in the streets for hot meals due to power cuts, according to reports by Reuters. Ukraine says it is bringing the war back home to Russia by striking deep inside the country, as well as hitting territory the invader controls, and has sought to populate with Russian immigrants. Lithuania's foreign minister said on Saturday that its embassy in Kiev was damaged when Russian missiles struck nearby. The Lithuanian foreign ministry said there were no injuries, but embassy windows broke, solar collectors were damaged, and the yard was scattered with debris. The minister, Kęstutis Budrys, Lithuanian with Vilk, summoned the Russian embassy representative to protest. He said this won't stop this madness and aggression against Ukraine, but added what might stop it is continued support to Ukraine, raising its resilience and piling pressure on Russia through sanctions so it finally sits at the negotiation table. A Russian airstrike killed 1 person and wounded 5 more in the city of Kherson in southern Ukraine, local officials said on Saturday. Zelensky posted a further plea for Patriot missiles. Every package of ballistic missile interceptors saves the lives of our people, and every night without them results in the more casualties. Due to the air defenses shortages, Ukraine was only able to shoot down 1 out of the 27 ballistic missiles in Friday night's barrage, Zelensky said. Middle East update. 1,222 Palestinians have been killed in Gaza since the start of the October 2025 ceasefire, bringing the total number of Palestinians killed in Gaza since October 7, 2023 to 73,349. Despite Trump's peace plan announced this week, Israeli attacks on Gaza killed 7 Palestinians, including 2 children. As the US-Iran war expands across the Middle East, there are warnings that it could spiral out of control as attempts to reach a ceasefire remain elusive. William?
Well, it's I was trying to do the French phrase there, more of the same thing. The Middle East is just an ongoing problem because the apparent peace that we're on the way to getting, that the Board of Peace has suggested, seems to be laden with confusion over what's going to happen first, whether Hamas is going to disarm or the IDF is going to withdraw. And until that's sorted out, then I think probably this tit for tat with people continuing will continue. And of course, Israel is yet to respond officially because Israel can carry on doing what it's doing pretty well without let or hindrance, and can take its time over whether it's going to respond. So one has to be sceptical about the latest idea that there's going to be peace. And frankly, I'm quite sceptical about the Board of Peace as well, which seems to be laden with American politicians and big business people, and one wonders what their plan for Gaza is in terms of what it's going to become after peace is declared. And that is far from clear, the sort of government that they will put up with and that the Israelis will put up with in Gaza. So the tit for tat continues, and I see at the moment no end to it. And what I do see from President Trump on all fronts, both in Iran and in Gaza, is bluster and nothing more than that. But maybe I'm just feeling a bit dyspeptic this Sunday lunchtime. Maybe Maureen has better news on it.
Maureen?
No, I don't think I have, Nadia or William. I mean, I agree with your analysis, William. I think Netanyahu, who obviously has not got as warm a relationship with Trump at the moment, is thinking of the elections that are coming up in Israel, and trying to placate his very right-wing population in order to get the votes that he needs. The situation of the population in Gaza is still totally and utterly abject, and there seems to be no moves whatsoever to try and have any rebuilding. And I think what you said about the Board of Peace, which we'll come to in a later subject as well, is maybe pushing President Trump to do something, because obviously they're looking at their possible investments at that area. I mean, if we go back a long time, Trump said that he saw Gaza as being, what was it, like a Côte d'Azur in the another Côte d'Azur in the Mediterranean, and that's the kind of thing that he's really interested in. So because there's been absolutely no reconstruction at all, maybe that's what he's pushing for something to happen on that front. But it doesn't look good, because Israel are still really doing what they want, and the fact that we'd have so many killings since the so-called peace,
Yes.
then I'm not hopeful for the poor people of Gaza.
Okay, thank you. And both of you, would you like to add something about Ukraine as well?
Yeah, well,
You want to go first,
Ukraine
Maureen?
is
Maureen, you can go for first. Yeah.
Ukraine, in both areas, I'm just thinking everybody, including the soldiers, are on both sides, are just so war weary, and it must be hellish living in that situation. And the resilience of the Ukrainian people is just continues to amaze. Well, Zelensky is clearly worried about his lack of air power and missiles, which he's supposed to be getting from the United States, are not there because they've been using so much arsenal in Iran. So that is worrying for Zelensky. But it just, again, seems to be one of these wars that's going to go on and on, because nobody seems to be willing to take the necessary steps to end it. And I have to say that the European Union and just seem to be nowhere in the game, which is really distressing because it is a war in Europe. And why they're not stepping up really baffles me. But maybe William's got something on this that I don't know.
The baton is passed. I think, yes, it's really important, I think, that the European Union and those just outside of it, like the UK, really take more of a hand in this and in other world events, because right now, I think the leadership that's coming from the States is diabolical. It's confused, it's bluster-filled, and it's not achieving anything except possibly shifting markets, which might help certain people and their financial interests. That might be a bit cynical, but there we are. So yeah, I too am rather distressed by the way that Europe isn't really able to do much to shift the dial in what's happening in Ukraine, because it looks like a war that will just go on ad infinitum. It's quite possible that Ukraine has proved its resilience now, and at great cost to its people, and is beginning to hit back deep within Russia. And I'll be very interested to find out what who the bomb that went off at the restaurant in Russia was meant to target, and who did it. I suspect it may be the Ukrainians, but you never know. But this is the sort of thing that will just go on and on and on at great cost of all sorts to many people for years, unless somebody takes a hand actually to finish it with an actual plan and the impetus to finish it and reach agreement so that it doesn't recur. And that's just not happening at the moment, I'm afraid.
Yeah, thank you. We'll move on to the next topic. In a worrying move, the Republika Srpska police in Zvornik in eastern Bosnia have called in staff and associates from the Srebrenica Memorial Center following the publication of the genocide report on Friday. The move is seen as intimidation of Srebrenica genocide survivors. Broadcasting Scotland reported from the Srebrenica in July to mark the 31st annual commemoration of the Srebrenica genocide, and we will be broadcasting interviews with genocide survivors and staff from the Srebrenica Memorial Center. Maureen?
Yes, well, to be honest, I really don't know very much about this story apart from your introduction, Nadia. Clearly, it's something that's very important to our producer, Linda Graham, and she has been, as you say, has just come back from Srebrenica, as indeed has the editor of the Scots Independent, Grant Toms, who I think accompanied her on this. So I think there's still more to come out on this topic, but clearly, genocide survivors have experienced such trauma that this lasts with them a lifetime, and clearly mental health help is needed, and surely it's something that, again, international agencies could be helping with. But you just get the feeling in today's world that all services are stretched, whether it be the Red Cross, International AIDS, Médecins Sans Frontières. Everybody's stretched to the limit because there are so many pockets of conflicts going on, and nobody's really stepping up to grapple the situation. And with such an awful character as head of the largest country in the world, democratic country in the world, who should be taking a lead on this and all of this, nothing is happening. And the other players talk the talk, Canada and the European Union, but everything grinds at such a slow pace that people get despondent.
Yes, thank you. William, it's 31 years, right, since it happened, and it's very, it's heartwarming, it's not able to listen to some of the stories they have mentioned in the interviews. So, William, what's your take on this?
Well, it was it is widely recognised as the worst atrocity on European soil since World War II. 8,000 men and boys systematically murdered and buried in mass graves despite the presence of a UN peacekeeping force. It's either, well, it's not really, human nature is such that we never quite settle things, do we? And it seems to me that Bosnia, its government is split between the Bosnian Serbs, the Republika Srpska, which has been responsible for these arrests of 26 of the Institute's staff, or at least either present or former staff, and the Bosnian and Herzegovina folks. And is that working out over time, or is there still secessionist pressure within Bosnia? And I think that possibly there is, and it could be growing. And also, I think genocide denial, which was banned in 2021, but nevertheless goes on, genocide denial continues to be part of that secessionist pressure. And you wonder if at some point down the line, it won't explode outwards again. The particular report that they put out, the Srebrenica Memorial Centre, said that there had been 149 examples of genocide denial in the last year. And that was up from 99 the previous year, so a considerable increase. And the top perpetrator, so to speak, was the former president of the Serb Republic, part of it, a guy called Milorad Dodik. And I suspect that he has still got a considerable influence in what goes on, although he was removed from his presidency in 2025. So it's one to watch in a troubled world. Maybe you just see the seeds of the next conflict of one sort popping out years hence. There's all sorts of other things going on with Bosnia, not least its attempt to accede to the EU, which is, of course, pressure in the opposite direction. So it's tense times, and it's one we should keep a watch on, and I'm sure Broadcasting Scotland will keep a watch on it. It does look like intimidation, and it's a serious thing if that's what's happening, because it's a very, very serious subject. It gets totally to the heart of what's going on in Bosnia right now and in its recent past.
Yeah, it's very heartbreaking, and I hope the history doesn't repeat, and we all can learn from what happened in the past in these kind of genocides. Yeah, Maureen?
Yeah, I was just wondering if you thought, William, that it's kind of right-wing influence, international right-wing influence, to try and stir things up. It's clear that Trump believes that government through chaos is his mantra, and it just, again, as I say, it's these pockets of things happening in the world that could come together in one great conflagration. And it strikes me that there may be right-wing agitators working in this area as well. It's just like the Holocaust deniers generally.
Yeah.
And that is quite worrying if that's the case.
That's possible. We've pockets of this all over the world right now. I suspect there has always been an internal pressure within Bosnia ever since the war. And the further away you get from the war, the easier it is to deny stuff. But yeah, that sort of influence is out there, and it's a very big worry all over the world in many, many places.
Yeah. Thank you. We'll move on to the next topic. This week, Andy Burnham announced his plans for education and devolution in England, but with no mention of how these plans would affect Scotland. How would his idea of written UK constitution affect Scotland's right to self-determination? William?
Whoa, there's a big question. I think it's not going to particularly help, because how do we create the written constitution since we haven't had it thus far? And who gets a say? Do the Scottish people have a say, or do we just suddenly impose a structure? I don't know. It's the whole influx of ideas suddenly from Andy Burnham is proving quite tricky to evaluate right now, because a lot of it has to do with his the need. I've no doubt he perceives to make his mark now and say some pretty fundamental things that are going to change and be different and improved in his view. But actually, when you get down to the nitty-gritty of it, it's quite difficult to work out how things will go. These things are complicated, and at this moment, we seem to be just at the level of sound bites. But overall, I would say that it looks as if his expressed view is that devolution is a good thing, and that everybody should have devolution, but probably Scotland's had just about the right amount of devolution and won't be getting any more, and so England will basically be, the regions of England will be catching up with the rest of it. And that basically, in a sense, relegates Scotland to no more than a region, and I don't believe that's what Scotland is, and I don't believe that that's what the majority of people in Scotland want it to be. And even some unionists, I suspect, would be a little bit unhappy if there were increased devolution for England and nothing whatsoever further came to Scotland. Now, of course, he could change his mind on that, and I suspect he will be changing his mind on quite a lot of things. So it very much is a wait and see. But it looks to me, from my perspective, as somebody who wants to agitate for Scottish independence as soon as we can credibly and possibly get it, like nothing more than a distraction that will be used to basically throw us off the trail of that. And therefore, I'm not particularly optimistic about what it means for Scotland in the medium term.
Maureen?
Well, I think so far Andy Burnham has shown a complete ignorance of Scotland and what goes on in Scotland. I mean, if we take education, for example, clearly he's worried about the number of youngsters not in education, training or employment in England. But he just needs to look to Scotland to see that our statistics show that consistently 95% of youngsters go into positive destinations from school, and that our school system has already been changed to include foundation apprenticeships as part of the exams, if you like, or the passing out that you can have on leaving school. So he clearly doesn't know what goes on. The foundation apprenticeships have been hugely successful, and you know, people say that children come out with fewer grades, hires or whatever. But if they're doing apprenticeships, that's not actually seems to be included in giving the weight that is requires in our system. And we have the SNP government has year after year increased the number of apprenticeships. So I believe that in Scotland there is the parity of esteem that's required. Okay, higher and further education is squeezed at the moment because of austerity, but our colleges particularly do a fantastic job in making sure that our children reach their full potential, whether it is gaining HNC certificates and diplomas, or in fact matriculating for kids who are able to go on to university but maybe felt that going from school to university was a huge leap. I am concerned about how an SNP government will deal with Burnham. Do we, as William suggests, I think, press for more devolution? I mean, if the regions are getting devolution in areas that we haven't got, then we need to make sure that we get them in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. That's kind of the progression towards independence and not the leap towards independence. Is there going to be a bit of a rumpus there? I don't know. But anything that moves Scotland to more control of its own affairs, I think, is a good thing. And, how we further independence, given that Andy Burnham has said no to a referendum, is also something that's going to be discussed within the SNP within the next few months at a newly convened National Assembly.
Yes, and also when it comes to the talk, there were kind of discussions about like mayoral positions in Edinburgh and Glasgow as well. I've seen in newspapers. Labour MPs are discussing about it, like, because according to the King of the North, he did very well as a mayor, so what's your take
I remember
on it?
I remember this being discussed in 1999 when the Scottish Parliament was set up. I remember Labour saying, or I think it was a woman from the Chamber of Commerce said, "Oh, the Glaswegians would be really sensible about this, and appoint somebody like one of the industrialists in Glasgow as their mayor." And I thought, aye, right. Um, and mayors is just something that's a total anathema to Scottish democracy, in my view. It's a cultural thing in terms of Scotland. I think democracy is really important to people in Scotland, and a mayor going off and doing his or her own thing with little accountability is not what is wanted in Scotland. And to be fair, people like Susan Aitken perform really well on the international stage of
Yes.
major cities in Europe and the world. And perhaps we don't sing about that enough in Scotland. But the problem is not the system we've got at the moment. It's I suppose, the lack of participation by the populace in consultations, and as we've seen in turnouts in local elections and things. But I doubt that mayors would make any difference, apart from more political, and it will be political, infighting at elections.
Yeah, thank you. William?
Well, we don't have mayors. We're just different, and we don't have mayors. And why should we have them imposed on us, even as a suggestion from the King of the North, which is somewhere down considerably several hundred miles from where I'm living. This north that we keep hearing about. Maybe that was how he made his reputation, but it's not something that we want here. In terms of devolution, greater devolution versus independence, let me be quite clear. I want the leap rather than the move towards. But devolution right now, we need control over all the levers, all the financial levers, in order really to make things radically different in the way that we need to for everybody. Right now, we've got a little bit of income tax, land and buildings transaction tax, a couple of other taxes, non-domestic business rates, goodness gracious me, and not really much room for manoeuvre in how we get the money flowing into Scotland. To be at the table waiting for scraps, even if they're slightly better scraps than we were getting before, is not where I want to be. So I'm still going to be fighting for the full thing. And over the next 2 or 3 years, it might get slightly interesting in that regard. Right now, though, I think Andy Burnham is going through his honeymoon phase when he can make all the sound bites, but the crunch will come in the next couple of months when he has to decide how he's going to pay for them. And he's also going to have to put up with the difficulties of actually, which may have been easier for him in Manchester than they would be in a UK setting.
Yeah, but Andy Burnham has denied the democracy for Scotland, right? Like through no second independence referendum when he became their Prime Minister.
He's not the first to do that.
Yes, yeah, he's not the first, but he still did it. Yeah. So we will move on to the next topic. As the UK economy continues to struggle, Andy Burnham has announced plenty of policies, but with little detail about their financing. On Friday, it was announced that the UK budget will be on 28th October. In Scotland this week, BP announced it was selling off its North Sea business, and the Scottish government agreed a trading partnership with India. Maureen, there are a couple of things, in this particular topic, not just one.
Yeah, well, I suppose the one that interests me clearly is BP stopping its North Sea operations. We haven't heard whether its headquarters in Aberdeen, which is fairly substantial and employs a lot of people, will continue, because, of course, companies like Shell and BP and Total have operations worldwide, a lot of which are decided and planned upon in their offices in Aberdeen, because that's where the skills lie. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. It's not unexpected, I suppose. Shell and Total and the other majors have already sold off their assets in the North Sea, and often the smaller companies that come in are better and more, and I really mean this, are better at getting things done and cooperating with each other than the majors, who tended to be very good at, looking after their own interests rather than the interests of the production and exploration of the North Sea as a whole. So I'm sure one of the smaller companies will come in and buy the assets. There is still oil there, and of course we await with interest what Andy Burnham is going to do in terms of Rosebank and Jackdaw and the petroleum tax. So once Parliament resumes and, as has been said, the budget comes along, we will see what the future of the North East and the North Sea is.
Yeah, William?
BP's been reducing its interests in the North Sea for the last 25 years. It's just gone off the cliff edge now in terms of that. And it reflects probably dwindling reserves that are slightly harder to get out and also more expensive to get out, which is the thing. And they're focusing their capital on what they would call high-value projects elsewhere. But they still think the North Sea is worth exploiting. It just maybe it's for somebody else to exploit, and we'll see what happens with that, particularly with the 1,100 people who are employed by BP. Yes, as Maureen said, they're one of a long line of energy companies who've exited the North Sea. Exxon, Mobil, Shell, and many others. And maybe it's for other companies to make something of it. But it is a big move, particularly coming just after Andy Burnham said he would be pragmatic about the North Sea. And there's another word that's full of, well, not really meaning. We don't know what he's exactly going to do. But he's going to be pragmatic, which is good. But this came out awfully like a response, although probably it's been getting planned for quite a long time. So, the world moves on, and Andy Burnham will have to move with it. And it's just one of the many things that'll be on his desk floating around, I think, for a bit. Interesting times.
Yes, and if it is okay to discuss about the trading partnership with India. Sorry, we have to. First, there were three topics. One was the budget, and the budget is going to be in October. They have announced. And what do you think is going to be in budget? And are we going to see the real vision of Andy Burnham and the budget?
Who would you like to answer this one?
Maureen.
Well, I think, the speculation is going to continue and rage until the budget on the 28th of October, isn't it? I mean, clearly, Andy Burnham has made all these kind of bright things and but not put any price tag on them. The interesting thing is that John Healey is now his Chancellor, having been a Defence Secretary before. So, and also remember, John Healey resigned because he didn't think that he was getting enough investment in defence. So there's going to be a clash there, I think, in terms of defence. But then there's all the other things that need to be looked at. And, the public the press tend to major on the social security budget, which, includes things like pensions, but the right-wing press always focuses on people not in work. So there are big decisions to be made. You remember Stammer tried to reform the social security budget and didn't get it through his parliament. His party, his backbenchers haven't changed that much. So it'll be interesting to see, but it'll, provide loads of column inches in the press and in the media in the run-up to the budget, and we'll be heartily sick of it all before the 28th of October, I suspect.
Yeah. William?
I'm not heartily sick of it. I feel like a teenager again, because there's a Labour government in and a Chancellor called Healy, and I don't know what's going to happen next. And that was the 1970s all the way through for me. So, excellent. But seriously, what is he going to... Well, he's going to... The budget is going to have to cover some of the things that Burnham has already confirmed, which would include paying for the removal of VAT on domestic energy bills from October onwards, and the single fare bus cap in England, and other such things. It's going to apparently move money and power out of Westminster into every postcode, which is the big devolution thing. And hopefully that will include the postcodes in Scotland this time. It'll be built in fiscal discipline, which means we go on about the fiscal rules an awful lot, which actually gives him much less room for manoeuvre unless taxes go up. And I'll be very interested to see how taxes go up, if that's what they do. I think that cost of living relief, that would be good, obviously, but if you're paying more tax, that maybe isn't so good. So have to spread the taxes properly. It's going to be a bit of a roller coaster ride, because right now, between now and October, there's going to be all sorts of other announcements that John Healy is somehow going to have to incorporate within it. I think it's going to be an exciting time if you're working with Andy Burnham, maybe not in a good way, but I'm sure John Healy has got the chutzpah to be able to deal with that. But of all the budgets of the last few years, it's actually the one that's got the greatest amount of uncertainty about how it's going to be pulled off, because we're in a time when the promises are going up, but the gilt yields are also going up, which means that the government is hitting up against the ceiling of what it can borrow. So the how are you going to pay for it is really a big, big question.
And one important thing is social care reform, William?
It's very important to do it, yep, and it will cost money.
Yeah,
so,
and how is it going to
happen?
How
you pay for it, and how you streamline things if you can't pay for it, and how you streamline things in a way that actually improves it. The social care reform, how many proposals have there been over the years by governments on social care reform in the last 20 years? And it seems there was a snip the BBC showed which had all sorts of prime ministers talking about it. I think Boris Johnson was talking about it even. Theresa May was certainly talking about it. And it never manages to get done. So it's a very tricky one. The devil is in the detail. So I remain a sceptic on that. But yes, it will be a target for sure.
So you think it's a soundbite?
I don't think it's a soundbite. I don't think it's ever been a soundbite when prime ministers are set out to do it and say, we're going to do it. And then they find out how hard it actually is to do, and nothing much actually changes. I don't think Burnham's cynical enough just to be doing soundbites, but some of them may turn into little better than soundbites, I'm afraid. But let's give him the benefit of the doubt for the moment. 28th of October will begin to show us.
Maureen, would you like to add?
Well, I wonder if we will hear about social care on the 28th of October, because he's given Baroness Casey another year instead of 2 to come forward with our report. And like you said, William, there have been loads of reports before, and don't forget that the government in Scotland tried to change social care in the last Parliament and failed because couldn't get cross-party support. I think cross-party support for something like social care is absolutely crucial. It's a bit like the National Health Service. It has to be cross-party support because, you know, if another government was to come in and change it in a new Parliament, that would be absolutely catastrophic. So, and there are lots of, remember, vested interest. It's not the wee care home run by a charity or a church or anything. There's big business in social care now. And it's going to be very difficult to get agreement on how social care is reformed, although it badly needs done because it's responsible for a lot of stuff like bed blocking and people with disabilities not getting the care that they need and everything. So it's a huge topic.
Yeah. And William, would you like to start discussing about the trading partnership with India? Scottish government agreed a trading partnership with India.
Okay. Yeah. Well, it's this is on the back of an agreement that the UK, an actual agreement that the UK made, but it has opened up some opportunities, as I understand it, and it's thought that it will be worth perhaps $3 billion a year by 2030, all going well. It's been announced in something called the Scotland-India Strategic Market Insight Report, and it's basically the $3 billion a year is about 50% up from where we are now, and part of that has been the removal of some tariffs, most notably on Scottish salmon, which the first deliveries tariff-free went to India just in the last week. But it's doubling down on areas where Scotland is strong, which would be whisky, salmon, financial services, renewables, tech, and trying to sell those into fast-growing Indian states. So there are opportunities there to be made for people if they're sensible about it, and it's certainly got some possibilities there. I would like Scotland to be striking its own trade deals, of course, and not just hoping for for deals to come along that Scotland can effectively utilise. But I'm not against Scotland utilising the ones that have come along. So this I think is a good thing.
Yeah, Scotland has its own needs, so negotiating by Scottish government itself to another country will be much better. Maureen.
Yeah, I think the important thing is that it's something two-way. I think there can be investment from India into Scotland as well, and we've seen our universities open campuses in India as well. So I think it's two ways. It's not just about our major exports, which of course are extremely important and lead to Scotland having a huge export value compared to other parts of the UK. And it was interesting in all the talk about Manchester that in terms of cities doing well, there's Manchester and then there was Glasgow and then Edinburgh, or Edinburgh and then Glasgow, I can't remember. So, Scotland, anybody who thinks that Scotland cannot manage on its own is really denying to themselves the potential of Scotland. And those exports that William mentioned are really, really important as part of our growth. But there are other things, as he said, like financial investments and, space and things like that, which India are involved in too. So, this is great for Scotland and it's great for inward investment as well as making sure that our exports are recognised throughout the world.
Yeah. One good thing about about whiskey was it was 150% of import tax before this agreement. Now it has become 75%. So there will be a significant amount of reduction in the price in whiskey over there in India, and that will be good for the Scotch is world famous. So it's good. So we will move on to the next topic. What has the BBC ever done for Scotland? Despite current advertising campaign, the new Ofcom report shows trust in the BBC in Scotland has fallen again as BBC spending in Scotland falls despite increased licence fee income. William?
Yeah, not good reading for the BBC particularly. This is an annual report, and it's a downward trend. How much money is the BBC spending on public service broadcasting in Scotland? And what is public service broadcasting? Well, the technical definition of that is high quality and diverse TV programming that meets audience need, that's socially valuable and properly covers important events in an accurate and impartial way. And, the Scottish public doesn't it certainly is less enthusiastic, shall we say, about how it's presented to itself by the BBC. Less enthusiastic than it was last year, and less enthusiastic than the rest of the UK. And to those of us who do watch, and I do, believe it or not, I do watch the BBC, and I don't know why, because I'm constantly finding myself just thinking about how awful everything is. Just 5 minutes of reporting Scotland can completely change my mood. And I don't think that other parts of the UK have themselves reflected in the same negative way as seems to be happening with Scotland. Then there's the question of how much of the spending is actually on people, or rather people making programmes who are based in Scotland. And the notorious example of that not working out was The Traitors, where 81% of the staff who were supposedly on a Scottish production were from London. And so, in a sense, even the spending that's going on public service broadcasting and similar is not necessarily reflecting or not benefiting, shall we say, people who are actually based in Scotland. So it's all just a wee bitty fraudulent, and I think I don't know what the answer is, except let's encourage independent broadcasters to get better and do more, and maybe we'll, when we finally become independent, we'll have a proper broadcasting scene that people recognise as their country. And I think that's what we're not getting from the BBC right now.
Yeah. Maureen?
Well, I think as long as the ethos of the BBC in the UK and Scotland is to do down Scotland, they're not going to flourish at all. I mean, the negativity of the BBC about Scotland, and not just the Scottish government, but everything Scottish, is appalling, absolutely appalling. No other country would put up with a national broadcaster behaving like it does, as I say, towards its government, but also to other things in Scotland. If you listen to it, it's negative, negative, negative all the time. And if you look at who's on the board from Scotland, that's maybe not surprising. But as I say, until it changes, I don't think it's got a future in Scotland. People are just avoiding mainstream media to get their message across, including increasingly the Scottish government and the SNP. So I don't think that under the way it's governed at the moment and run at the moment, it has got a future. I think its readership or listenership or viewership will continue to decline as long as it carries on like it does.
Okay. So is it lack of inclusion or is it media ethics erosion? William?
Lack of inclusion? Sorry, what was the question exactly?
Is it the erosion of media ethics or is it lack of inclusion?
I think it's just an extension of the attitudes that have always been there. I don't think there's any specific way you can put your finger on it. The BBC is by definition, it's the British Broadcasting Corporation, and it's by no means the Scottish Broadcasting Corporation. Scotland is, as Maureen said, fairly unique in the way that it doesn't have a national broadcaster that is very specifically a Scottish broadcaster, and that's the problem. The BBC tries to be inclusive across the board, but it's more that the way we're reflected to ourselves is not something people recognise, and you don't buy into a broadcast if you don't recognise the way it's portraying you to it, and that's the issue. Nor is it particularly an ethical issue. It's just the way things are, and they need to change.
Yeah, Maureen?
It's funny, I don't know if you've noticed recently, but when the BBC go out and do vox pops on the street, they don't get the answer from the public that they're really looking for, and they get really annoyed. I can't give specifics. I can't remember specifics of what it. Oh, I know what it was. One example of that is the new ScotRail app, which obviously had its teething problems and its glitches, and people weren't that bothered about it. And the BBC were dying for people to say, oh, typical of the Scottish government kind of thing. And they just weren't saying that. And they were getting increasingly annoyed with folk who were saying, oh, it's teething problems, everything like that happens and things like that. So I think that hopefully maybe the people in the BBC are beginning to see that the public are not listening to what the portrayal of Scotland that the BBC are doing, and the Scotland that they live in is different from the BBC's portrayal.
Yeah, we need to have funding for, broadcasting, like Broadcasting Scotland, and so that like we can have views on Scottish people itself, like produced by Scottish people.
We need to let 1,000 flowers bloom. Absolutely. Yeah. There's a lot of potential and a lot of talent in Scotland that is not really getting the chance to be that sort of broadcaster. The constraints are there, and the constraints need to be removed, because if you remove the constraints from the Scottish people, the people of Scotland, you will be amazed by what you get. And we just want to be normal. We just want to have a broadcaster that's Scottish. Small areas of sub-areas of other countries have their own broadcaster. We don't really. We are trailed along as an afterthought by the BBC in London, and that's got to end at some point.
Yes, thank you. We will move on. Maureen, would you like to add on that? Sorry.
Well, I was just going to say that our next topic about the Commonwealth Games and how they've been in Scotland is a classic example of the BBC not wanting to portray Scotland as somewhere that is really performing well on the world stage. The fact that the games aren't being covered in mainstream media is absolutely appalling. Absolutely appalling. But I'll let you introduce the subject, Nadia.
No, that's fine. Has Scotland saved Commonwealth Games? That's my question, and you have nailed it. Maureen, you can start with that.
Well, I think they have. I think the fact that they stepped in and that the Commonwealth Games Committee realised that Scotland, although a small country, has the resources, has the stadia and the places where swimming pools, etc., where an international games can be held. And I think, despite the short introduction of time and everything that has to be arranged, I think, Scotland has absolutely nailed it. I haven't really heard any negativity about it. I think Glasgow has stepped up amazingly, and the Scottish people have rallied round and, shouted their heads off and their throats dry, encouraging all our athletes and competitors. And, I must say Neil Facky, who originally is from Dice in Aberdeen, has done Scotland and himself proud again. And yes, I think although it's not as big as normal, I hope, and I maybe we'll come on to this wider thing. I hope that it's saved this Commonwealth Games for the future, because I definitely do think that it has a role on the international stage.
Yeah, William.
Okay, before I talk about the Commonwealth Games, I just wanted to make one reference. Having done down the BBC in its entirety for about the last 5 minutes, I was going to say that BBC Alba has been broadcasting the Commonwealth Games in Gaelic, right enough, and good, at least somebody on that side of it. I know BBC Alba isn't entirely BBC and all that sort of thing, but it comes under that umbrella, and that's a good thing. As to whether Scotland saved the Games, undoubtedly, nobody else was going to bid for it after Victoria pulled out in 2023. And Scotland did so in a pragmatic way. And I'm using the word pragmatic. This is the one that Andy Burnham said he would be. He needs to learn some things about pragmatism here. And how that pragmatism worked itself out was that, they didn't try to do what was impossible. They worked within the constraints they had, which so often the Scottish Government has to do. And certainly the Scottish Commonwealth Games folk did. Not a large-scale event, just the 10 sports and just a cut-down timetable, but using accommodation in hotels and universities rather than an athlete's village, and existing venues for the sports. They didn't need to build anything new. And it's worked. It's undoubtedly worked, and it's caught the imagination of the people in Scotland, perhaps not by watching it on television very much because of its unavailability, which is indeed shocking. Maybe a part of a wider malaise, but there you are. And it hands the baton over now to India, which of course links in nicely with the trade things that we just mentioned, and Ahmedabad will be taking it on in 2030. And we'll be expanding it out a wee bit, but I suspect they will be taking a few notes out of the Glasgow book as to how it was done there, so as not to be over expensive, because there is an overall problem with big sporting events. They are becoming too unwieldy and expensive for individual countries to manage. Even the World Cup, for example, was shared by a number of countries, by Mexico, Canada and the USA this year, and the 2030 version will also be shared. And maybe we need to look again at how sporting events, big ones, work. Scotland's gone some way towards showing how that can be done. And the Commonwealth Games will certainly go on in 2030. And I wish them well. I do think they are a good thing. It's nice. I mean, I'm not entirely a fan of the Commonwealth. It's good to have pals and everything, but to have be pals with people that you were formerly the colonial masters of is not a very comfortable look. But nevertheless, with that caveat aside, it's a good thing to have common cause with other nations, and the Commonwealth Games is just part of that. And well done to Glasgow, and let's hope the weather stays good for the rest of the day as they finish tonight.
Yeah, as you said, William, the president of Indian Olympic Association, PT Usha, she's the one who's taking the baton to India. And she is here and she gave a couple of interviews. As Maureen said, one thing she said was every time Indian athletes or any athletes go to the ground, Scottish people support us if it is their own, people, those who are competing. There was no friction or anything. They felt Scotland is their country, and they said that sentiment, they are going to take it to India. And that's what one big lesson they have learned, as you said, Maureen, we have done it proudly. So would you like to add anything? We have got 1 minute.
Well, I think that the Commonwealth has a role. I think that, to see it disintegrate would be a shame, because who then do these countries fall under the influence of? And that is a real worry to me. Yes, we've got a horrible colonial past, but I think we can get over that as, countries develop at a faster pace than ourselves. And that, if I think of the Scotland-Malawi partnership that I was involved in the 2014 Commonwealth Games, I was there supporting the Scottish team, obviously, but Malawi have a really good netball team. And the female Malawian parliamentarians also play football once or twice a week. When they get together. So maybe that's something that our parliamentarians could take on board as well. But I do think there is a role for the Commonwealth in international affairs. I hope that we don't see an Infantino type thing in the Commonwealth Games. We've had some terrible things happen to football this week. And we must make sure that that's never allowed to creep into the Commonwealth Games or indeed the Olympics. And that is a worry now after what's happened this week with FIFA. So, sport is really important. It does encourage other people to take part, which is why it's so important that it is broadcast widely, because not everybody can get to Glasgow to watch it in person. But, if it just encourages 2 or 3 people more to undertake sport, it has done its job. And it has been a great showcase for Scotland. And we need all that in the international stage as we move towards independence.
Yes, we have done. That's proud, yeah. So it's time for us to wind up now. Well, that's for this week's Full Scottish. Before I go, I just want to remind you that at Broadcasting Scotland, we depend on the generosity of our supporters. To everyone who has donated and to everyone who has signed up to make a regular monthly payment, thank you very much. We can only exist with your support. Our programs will always be free to view. However, if you can afford £5 per month, please consider becoming a Broadcasting Scotland supporter and please donate whatever you can afford. Thank you, and thank you again to our guests, Maureen Watt and William.